Hello everyone, my name is Roxy Darling and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be showing you how to sculpt a bust. It is a head, neck, and shoulders of a sculpture. How to make a mold from silicone of that sculpt so you can make multiples from one sculpt so you don't have to keep making the same sculpt over and over again. I was inspired by vintage mannequin heads that people have then painted and sculpted to be some really fascinating characters. I began this project by measuring and sketching out what I wanted to sculpt. The base of this sculpture will be tin foil covered in super Sculpey. In my last video, I showed you how I sculpted the face in more detail than this video. Right now, I'm just going to do a quick recap of what I did in the last video. So if you want a more detail on how I did this face, please check the description box down below and I'll leave a link to that video. Otherwise, this is where I got to the last video. I baked the head, and so now it's time to create the rest of the sculpt. I twist two pieces of armature wire together in order to create a stronger armature in order to connect the head, neck, and shoulders together. I will also be doing this later when I make my casts of the head, neck, and shoulders because the neck is going to be thin and it will create a point in which the piece would break. I'm using liquid polymer clay and regular polymer clay as an adhesive because I will be baking all of this in the oven in a little bit. Once the armature wire has been inserted, I will then use the polymer clay to build up the neck and shoulders. After I did the original sketch, I decided I wanted to do more of an elongated neck than the original sketch, only because I saw some of the mannequin heads that were more stylized that had the longer necks. I tend to add a lot of jewelry to things because my background is jewelry. So yeah, I just wanted to give myself a little extra room. You don't have to do this if you do decide to use this tutorial to create your own bust, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's what I'll be doing. It was at this point, after I baked it, I realized I didn't like how far I brought the polymer clay down, and at a point, I deviated from the sketch because I thought that's what I wanted to do, but I used an X-Acto blade and cut that down and just rounded out the bottom with some polymer clay before I turned it around and started sculpting in the chest. After I sculpt in the chest and start refining everything before I bake it, I go in with some clay softener. You can use clay softener or rubbing alcohol to just brush out any of the lumps and bumps and fingerprints. After it's baked, it's time to make the mold. I use plasticine to connect the sculpture piece to this bottom piece of cardboard, and I'm going to use some curved cardboard that I just kind of rolled into itself to put around the piece. I want to make sure everything fits before I really tape everything together. I'm wanting to make sure the cardboard wall goes around and is snug, but it doesn't hit the shoulders. So I'm also looking above to make sure that the shoulders are lined up kind of where the cardboard pushes out a little bit, only because I just don't want them to touch. I also want to cover all my seams really well. I'm using packing tape because I don't want any spills. Silicone is messy, sticky, and expensive. Once I tape the cardboard wall together, I am going to line it with acetate. Some sculpture artists use heated up beeswax to line the cardboard as a resist from the silicone, but I had acetate on hand, so I'm going to do that. Right now I am using some hot glue to glue the sculpture to the cardboard base, which is just actually a cake round for cake decorating. This is actually going to be the top of the silicone mold, and I'm making it a funnel shape because this is what I'm going to funnel the plaster of Paris in later, and I just added more of a funnel shape with the plasticine clay, and I'm checking to make sure everything still fits before I start gluing and adding more clay to the cylinder before I start pouring everything. It's time to hot glue the cylinder wall to the cardboard base, and then it'll be time to mix up the silicone. Now to mix equal parts of this silicone of A and B together, I'm using these small Tupperwares to measure out the silicone, and then I'm going to use the larger Tupperware to combine them together. I'm also cutting what are called chunkies out of old silicone molds to mix in with the new silicone because it's going to be a filler, because this is going to use a lot of silicone. Unfortunately, what I didn't do was a tester to see if the new silicone would cure with those chunkies. It doesn't, but I end up being able to use the mold in the end, so no worries. Here I'm now beginning to mix my part A and part B together. And don't forget, when mixing your two parts together, to use your spatula to scrape down the walls of your mixing container periodically. And you can see here at my cylinder, I did add some more plasticine clay to act as an extra barrier in case there is any leakage of the silicone when I'm pouring. And then also extra protective barrier is the silicone tray, which is the green thing, because I've met myself before and I've had silicone spills. I am going to pour this silicone mold in a few batches. So here you'll see me pour some silicone in and then start feeding in some of the chunkies and push the chunkies to the side so they don't actually touch the sculpt, just in case they don't cure. I did let it cure before I added a whole bunch of chunkies on top of the sculpt, because this will be my final pour. To the left, I have a setup to make a mold of a wooden plaque, which is going to be the base of these sculptures. I am also making sure that there's no bubbles in the silicone that I just poured, so I'm just tapping it all around. After about 24 hours, I checked everything to make sure it was cured and then started to demold. Is demold the right word? Whatever. I just started taking off the plasticine and the hot glue, and then I go in and I start removing all the cardboard and acetate. As you can see, the top of the mold is the black blob of hot glue that I created earlier to connect the sculpt to the base. I'm now using my X-Acto blade to cut the mold open. I am trying to cut the mold down the sides and around the shoulders and the side of the head, just in case there's any seam later. I did label it on the cardboard cylinder earlier, so I knew where to cut. This is when I knew that the chunkies did not cure with the new silicone, which was unfortunate. But now that I have it all cut open, I'm able to see that since I pushed it away from the sculpt, that I can actually use the mold. To double check to see if I can use the mold, I'm going to mix some plaster of Paris real quick and pour it in there just to see what I get. And if you bake, you always bake and pour wet into dry, but I did check the directions of the plaster of Paris and it says do not pour water into the powder, so that is why I'm pouring the powder into the water. Plaster of Paris also cures really quick, so I am trying to mix this as quick as I can without any clumps of powder or leave it with a lot of bubbles. So that is the issue that I am most having with plaster of Paris. My mold is prepped with rubber bands and tape. I used packing tape, and this is the funnel area I was talking about earlier, and you can see me pouring just a little bit of plaster Paris in there and rolling it around, and that is to prevent a lot of bubbles in there. For some reason it just kind of rolls into the crevices of the face. I'm just trying to pour it as quick as I can, and I didn't know how much plaster of Paris to use, so I made a little extra, and then I have my molds next to me where I can pour the extra in there. And I even use at some point, because I made I think 7 of these plaster of Paris casts, I even did some plaster of Paris into some flower molds, which you can see here. This is my tester piece, so I did not add my armature wire, which ended up being a mistake because I really do need that armature wire, because as I feared, it did break in the neck area, which you will see. You will also see this mold is cut into 3 different sections, and that's because I had thought I was going to just cut the mold down into chunkies and redo a new mold, but I decided to do this tester piece. And what I learned is I can use the mold still, I just really need to use the armature wire in the neck and really pay attention to bubbles. Here you will see I set up 2 sticks on the side and a rubber band with an armature wire curved almost like a candy cane. And so when I'm pouring it in, the thing holds the wire up so it doesn't fall all the way down to the head or lean over to the side. It just gives me a little more control. And this is a bunch of different molds or casts that I made from that mold. And you can see different heights that I tried just to see if I wanted to do just the shoulders or just a hint of the chest or the full chest. So if you got any value from this video, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, and follow me if you want to see what I make with these casts. See you soon. Bye-bye.